together, try to find a way to mix and to be together. Okay, inshallah. Okay, khair bi'idhnillah. Sorry? No, but the whole teachers, we are going to be 6 or 7, so we need to mix and to try to find a way to do this. And I'm happy that what I said out of not knowing that you were discussing this among yourselves, that you understood that we made a mistake about the visit, and that it was not something which was a privilege. So really it was people thinking for us and not us thinking for you, or thinking about you in a way which was good. So sorry for that, but at least you were able to make it. Look, 3 things that I wanted to say now as an introduction about the topic. It's that Muslim European legal and ethical contribution. An introduction, 3 points, and then 2 parts that I want. I will be quite structured in the way I'm going to tackle this issue and try to come with, in fact, our contribution as challenges, and many things have been said by Ibrahim and before him Dr. Ahmed Ali Bashij, but I will try to put this in something which is, yes, a European experience, but you can see anyone who is coming from any other countries, the States or even South Africa or Singapore. These are all places where I know, and you will see how much this is connected. In fact, that these are the same challenges, and it's a question of mindset, methodology, and priorities. So something that I wanted to say as an introduction is this historical experience of us being in Europe or being in the West or being in this understanding that we are a minority within a non-Muslim majority country. So this very experience, which by the way, whoever is telling you that's new, it never happened in history, that's completely wrong. Meaning the people who are saying this don't know anything about what happened in India, what happened in Asia, what happened in Africa. This is something which is a historical reality that, and scholars have been dealing with this in a very deep way. We have from all the schools of thought, and mainly if you look at the Hanafi, the way they were thinking about we have to deal in many of the fatwa that came to South African people coming from people who were in India, and this was published at the beginning of the end of the 19th century, even the 18th century and the 19th century, 20th century. It's not new at all. Now what is new, is true, is the very powerful secular state imposing, and this is something which is a bit new, which is where religion sit in the whole picture. That's completely different. So now the new presence of Muslims in the West, in the United States or in Europe, came for us with a new situation that's true, dealing with the secular, dealing with the center of the world culture, the world dominant economic system, and leading scientific knowledge. And I think that all this is connected, is knowledge as to sciences, is culture as the world culture, is economy as and we cannot just disconnect this. It's not only about economy, it's not only about knowledge, and it's not about culture. It's all connected. And this is a new experience for us, which is once again dealing with the legal framework, but not only. We understand now in our experience in the West that it's not only about the legal issues. While in the past, the scholars and the fuqaha were dealing with us as Muslims, what are the answers that we are going to give in fiqhi term, in legal term about the situation. Now it's deeper than that, it's more complex, and these new experiences came with new challenges and new understanding. How do we have to deal with our scriptural sources, our references? Now, this is a first thing which is, in fact, out of this very difficult situation, it might be that many positive things are coming out of this experience. And I would say, as a Muslim looking at history, that it's not by accident that we are going through this history, this experience, this historical experience. It will help at the periphery to rethink many dimensions at the center, if you understand what I mean in historical terms, that the periphery of the Islamic experience is coming back to the center. And when I was writing to be a European Muslim, I said it quite clearly that the experience of Western Muslims will have a tremendous impact on Muslims around the world, even at the center. And you can see already this, that it's happening. Now, the second point that I wanted to make is that our perception of the environment, it's also important, and it evolved. So from, this historical experience is we are just here for a while and then no, we are going to stay, and the deeper understanding of the environment is very important. And first, of course, we were dealing with, as minorities or perceived religious minorities, we had to deal with the state first, is the center of power, telling us how we have to deal with the state, and then the secular society, but also the current culture, because many people are telling you, and this is not wrong in itself, is that the internal migrations in Europe, and even in the States, for example, were coming with people with the same culture. Even Latinos, who are facing the most important discrimination in social terms in the States today, these are the figures, are in fact perceived as coming from the same culture because they are Christians. Now, we have to be very cautious with this, because it's not exactly that, but there is something which is important. It's the connection between Islam as a religion and cultures that are not Western culture and not perceived as such. Add to this sometimes, as in in Europe, in the States, the color. That's a very important thing, because we see that many things that are happening now as controversial issues have to do with visibility. Is the new visibility of Muslims. So this understanding is also something that our perception of the environment, of the challenges coming from the environment, has moved, has deepened, and we understand that it's much more. So it's not only that our historical experience is about a new situation, it's also our perception of the environment is moving on, and it's more in fact sophisticated and articulated, and because of this we have no choice but to come back to our understanding of our Islamic references. In fact, it's the complexity of the environment that is pushing us to come in a deeper way to our principles, to our the Quran wa Sunnah, our understanding, in the way we're understanding this. So the environment is once again coming and asking new questions that we have to deal with. So it's not, we can't just come with legal answer to very deep cultural, economic, social, and religious questions that we have. So I think that we have to take this into account, meaning that many of the people around us in the West, they don't get this. They don't see the evolution of the Islamic thought. And sometimes we answer not ourselves being aware of how things are changing within, which is, as I'm always putting it, there is no faithfulness to the Islamic tradition without evolution in our understanding. Faithfulness is about evolving in our understanding. So there is no faithfulness. Status quo is in itself not faithfulness. It's evolution of understanding that is faithful to our principles. And as, for example, Dr. Ahmed was saying this morning, is just, the fact that we are talking about rituals, and in the Islamic terminology, very often the rituals, it's for us rules, ahkam, and it's not the same in the European context. We are not talking, the legal framework has nothing to do with rituals. So this differentiation, for example, the way we have to deal with the surrounding environment, means that in the way we are dealing with our own terminology, we need to get it right in order to be understood. It's not only to be understood within, it's to be understood outside. So this is something which is a very important process, which is, how am I going to get the very essence of my principles, my rules, to be understood by people who have another categorization in the way they deal with things. So this is something which is part of an intellectual process which is important. So this is the second point, is our understanding of the environment. The third one is, in fact, the first stage, and the first, in historical terms, and this is, but once again, it's normal. It's a normal process. It's a normal process, but what is normal should not be the final answer that we have. We have to go through it, but we need to be aware of it in order to change it. And to change it in which way? In fact, in historical terms, very often we had as Muslims to respond to questions that were put to us in the way, you know, we were perceived. In fact, this is Islam, and this is where, and then the question is, without knowing it, by responding to questions, you nurture a mindset which is on the defensive, and you listen to the question and to answer. So in fact, you are less able to say who you are than to respond to how you are perceived from outside, which in fact is the reverse picture of Orientalism. But this was put here. This was the very essence of the dialogue here and the discussion here. So for example, the questions that were put to us is, integration integration means what? The people who are talking about integration is, in fact, you are not one of us. So you have to come and to integrate. So it's a host country. So what was in historical term a truth could become, if you keep on responding to the same question, acknowledging something which is changing with history. And Muslims sometimes, even if they refuse to talk about integration, they are speaking as integrated people. You understand what I mean? Is that you may refuse the terminology but think in the same way. And I think that this is critical in the psychology, because, you know, when we speak about interpreting our text, it's very important. For example, we say, you know, all the scholars, when they were reading the Quran with Sunnah, were influenced by the environment. That's true. But it's not only knowledge, it's psychology. It's something which is the informal way that is nurturing your mind in the way you read the sources. So if you think and you end up thinking, oh, I'm a minority, I'm dominated, so the way you read the Quran is, how am I going to protect myself from this environment? So the mindset has, it's the light through which you look at things. And this is the way the questions are put, is not out of, you know, a psychological environment that has to do with the way you deal with. So integration, for example, secular state, the way it was put to us is that this is the secular state. We know it's not Islamic, so now you have to deal with it. And the way it was presented to us sometimes was in a way that we were not even ourselves studying what they were talking about. It was an ideological imposition on us everywhere. So you have now people in America speaking about the secular state in a way it was not even talked about by Christians, but they are doing this to Muslims. So, and they are presenting this as normative, which is not. It's ideological. It's a reconstruction of secular reference just to put the Muslims in a situation that they have to respond. This is the way it's put. So sometimes I am always saying we have to question the question and to question the concept. I say, what are you talking about? Let us speak about the normative way of dealing with secularism, for example. So sometimes, by the fact that you have to respond, you don't have time to question the question or to analyze from where the question is coming. But this has an impact on our psychology. The same with citizenship. The same with citizenship, and it's a deep question, as I was talking about. You remember when we were talking about policy and politics, is that what do we mean, and how citizenship could be today separated from human dignity. And then, more than that, the new categorization that you have now in all the European countries, and even now in the States, is this new concept of foreign citizens. So you are within, but not exactly within. So there is something in you which is not helping you to be a true, full citizen. And this is there. And you can say it's not in the legal framework, but it's everywhere in the psychology. So, as you know, the legal texts are read through a specific psychology. And you can be inclusive or you can be exclusive in this. So, so the way the question were put, and there is something which is even deeper than that. When you are on the defensive and you think that you are under attack as Muslims, you are going to listen to some of the questions in the way they are put to you as a Muslim. And you respond as a Muslim. And in fact, there is something which is the liberation psychological process which is important, is that sometimes you need to get it right from the very start of the discussion, that some questions that are put to you as Muslims are not Islamic and have nothing to do with Islam. So in fact, sometimes you have to dis-Islamize the question by saying, has nothing to do with Islam. Let me give you 3 examples here. For example, when it comes to the problem that we have with education and social justice, is that sometimes the way you are looked at is, we have a problem with you because this is Islamic, this is your religion. And in fact, it has nothing to do in the suburbs in France, it has nothing to do with Islam. This is socio-economic problems. This is the way you have integrated the people. The geography of your integration is a problem, the social integration. You put people together and then you say, oh, they are all Muslims, but that's not the problem. The problem is not Islam. The problem is the social status and gathering the people. This is segregation and social segregation, which is the problem. And some Muslims are responding to this through Islam. Why? That's not the question. So to de-Islamize the socio-economic questions, for example, it's important. The same with culture, that sometimes you are pushed to think that this is an Islamic problem. It's a cultural problem, and we have to in this to be able to deconstruct the whole question. Something which is deeper than that even is this connection between Islam and migration and immigrants. That's not an Islamic problem. It has to do with migrations and deep way of dealing with migration. So sometimes we have to de-Islamize the questions that are put to us. But to do this, you have to be confident. Muslims being able to say, I'm a Muslim, but has nothing to do with Islam. This is also, not to be on the defensive. So you take another dimension in the discussion. So we have to be, the way the dialogue is put, to ask question is power. To put questions is power. And to liberate yourself is also to question the power of the people who are asking the question by saying, I'm sorry, that's not the point. You're not. But you need to be a bit confident to do this, not to feel on the defensive, always to have to justify. So these are three main points as an introduction, which is the whole thing, that all what I'm saying here, these are things that you can find in the United States, you can find in everywhere where Muslims are living, even, by the way, in Muslim majority countries. Just, this is specific to our Western experience, but some of them, you will find them in Muslim majority countries. Now, if I come to the first part of my talk, I want to raise 5 points that are for me important, that were, in fact, through this experience, what are the questions that came to us from our understanding of Islam, from the environment. So questions that came from the state, came from the societies, but also the way we were reacting in a natural way to these questions. So what are these questions that we had as Muslims from the legal perspective? From the legal perspective, because we are talking about the legal and our contribution. The first question that came out of the history of the Islamic thought was, in fact, twofold. The first is, where are we? Who are we? And these are not simple questions. In legal term is the very old, and this had an impact on the Muslim mindset, is the whole discussion about Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb. That you had scholars that we were talking to us 30 years ago saying, it's not our natural space to be here, because the natural space is to be in majority as Muslims. Once again, that's disputable in history, but in fact is, where are we? So how do we define the West? How do we define countries? And why is it important? Because in fact, in legal term, your answer will have an impact on the psychological side of the answer. If you keep on repeating that you are in non-Muslim majority country, meaning that in fact these are not your country, is that you are here in a historical experience, you end up nurturing the mindset that you are here. You can even be a citizen, but it's not your it's not your country. So you can keep on repeating, and I have been doing this for 20 years. We are at home. It's something to say we are at home. It's something else to feel that you are at home. And when you are at home, it means that you are able to say, as the prophets, peace be upon them all, when they were saying, Ya qawmi, I'm talking to you, you are my people. You don't like me, but I'm here to serve you. Meaning to serve you, I know that my future has to do with you. Because my future is to want the best for me as much as for you. I mean, you are my people. So in psychological term, if you keep on responding to this question on a legal term, you don't get the psychological side of it. In fact, you can nurture in legal term this perception that we are not really at home, because we are thinking of the legal framework as a protective framework, not as an inclusive framework. Legal with the mindset of being at risk is a structure which is protecting. By the way, it doesn't mean that we don't have to go through this. We have to go through this, but keep in mind that we want to go beyond that. Because we were talking about the Jewish experience, and many times when I was talking with rabbis and people are saying, you know what protected our religion was also a very strict legal framework, and they are right. They are right, we need to be quite clear on some of the rules. So this is why the Maqasidiyun, the people who are talking only about the principles and the objectives without rules, they are worrying me. But I think it's very dangerous. So at the same time, protection and contribution all together, protecting the rules and having a vision to contribute. This is the chemistry which is the most difficult to get in psychological terms. You have to be clear on the risk and clear and confident as to your contribution, both together. Protecting and contributing all together. But contributing and say we are all the same, and what I see sometimes with some of the scholars who want to please the West by being don't scared, don't be scared, we are good, is that we have the same principles. I'm sorry, not at all. That's too easy to say. So we have some common principles, but we have things to protect. And all what we are seeing now with this, colonization of our way of dealing with Ramadan, with praying, that's very dangerous if we don't have something which is in fact a universalist take on our contribution. But we need to look at what the Jewish tradition did to protect some of it, and they did this, and this is in Islam essential, is that we need to have both. So now, who we are and where we are is both, is to be able to say, wherever you are able to say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah, you're at home. I'm at home. Wherever I can say this, وَأَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةٌ, that the earth, Allah's earth is wide. I can go wherever. Now, what does it mean? It means that where I can say this, I have to respect some rules, and I have to base this on two things: al-aqidah as essential, and then Islam as the principles. And this is where Islam, and this is not by accident that the Prophet ﷺ arriving in Medina start with the mosque. The mosque is the symbol of a presence that is being constructed in something which is min al-arkan, that we pray. So to come and to say we are good and we have the same principles and forget, no. We say we have the same principles starting with the mosque. The mosque is the light, and then we have something to give to this society. So I would say here that where we are was a big question, and then some were saying Dar al-Da'wah and Dar al, and this is why we have to discuss this, because it's also very important to I'm not going to give you a final answer to this, but it's up to you to discuss this. But who are we in this society to try to be good Muslims, to be faithful to our principles, but what is our role towards the people who are around us? And this is also something which is important, because if you say, and this was my point about Dar al-Da'wah, if you say Dar al-Da'wah, I have a problem with this because it's doubly misunderstood by Muslims and by non-Muslims. By Muslims because they think that they have a role to convert the people, and they are counting much more than understanding that, when I'm saying this, if you say about Dar al-Da'wah, you have a mindset which is always what we see with Muslims, is that they think about themselves through the eyes of the others. So they are very happy when the West or the people are pleased with their presence, but say, you know what, they like what we are saying. And so what? We're not here to please, we are here to be consistent. And my take is that when you are consistent, you please. But sometimes when you please first, we are not so consistent. You understand the priorities here in the discussion. So this is where, as a challenge, is this definition of where we are, and this was done by the scholars in a legal understanding, questioning what was done by the scholars about Dar al-Harb, Dar al-Islam, and trying to rediscuss this. And what is interesting, whatever is your final answer on this, is that it was done in a very constructive way. This is, for the last 50 years, a discussion that was there and has an important impact For example, in the way you define Dar al-Harb, it will have an impact in the way you are dealing in economic terms and in social terms with the surrounding society. And you know that from some of the schools of law, what you define as Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb has an impact on the way you are going to deal with the surrounding. And this has been questioned by the scholars and the European Council, the American Council, the Indian Council. They were all discussing this in something which is an important improvement. So in this environment, these are a question where the way we put this, the way we start talking about this, who we are, where we are, has an impact on the legal framework, but also the mindset, the way we look at the environment and the way we are going to have an impact on it. The second thing that happened also is all this discussion about fiqh al-aqalliyat. So it's fiqh, law and jurisprudence of minority. So you can agree or not with this. I don't agree with the concept. I'm not buying the concept. I don't think it's right to speak about aqalliyat, but that's fine. That's not the problem. At least what is important is that when you read what was produced, all the fatwa, the legal opinions that came, and all the work that was done, it's also something which was questioned is the very understanding of Sharia. And the Sharia as a reference. Once again, very often in fiqh al-aqalliyat, Sharia was perceived from the legal viewpoint, from the legal reference. But in fact, even though it started to be discussed through the legal, it has an impact on the substance and the essence. And then this is where the discussion is how do we implement, how is the reference. So, for example, when I was talking to the West, could be wherever, and even in African countries, for example, saying with the people we have to implement Sharia, the starting point is a deep understanding of Sharia. When you start saying La ilaha illallah, you enter, you say La ilaha illallah is to be a Muslim. Now, how you are going to be a Muslim? By now starting to pray and to fast, we are already in Sharia. This is my position. But having said that, it's not enough to say this. This is the starting point of we are implementing Sharia in the deep meaning. Now, it's not enough. It's not only to protect the rules, it's also to understand how are we going to achieve the objectives. So al-maqasid are also important in the light of the rules, but in the way people are telling you, for example, you know what happened in the States with this Sharia bill campaign, be careful, they want to implement, and be careful. In fact, the point is not to avoid implementing Sharia, is to make Sharia a dirty word. And this is said by the people who are saying this, is Sharia should be something which is a word. And the problem is that many Muslims are scared even now to touch and to speak about this. And we have to be very clear on this. Sharia, there is no Islam without Sharia. Now let us define this. And then if you come to fiqh al-aqalliyat only, that's going to be a problem, because you are reducing Sharia to a set of legal framework and on the defensive, which in fact Sharia should be a way that is a contribution to the world, not a defensive framework for the Muslims. A contribution to the world and not a defensive framework for Muslims. Look at the difference. Scholars are coming with a defensive framework. It's that you are protecting Muslims. And this is what I could expect from some scholars. Protect the Muslims, yes, as I said, but this cannot be the final word. So now we have this discussion about Sharia, and you can see how it's coming back to us in our understanding. We need to come to this discussion, and this is where, in fact, the West is contributing for the Muslims to define Sharia in a better way, is to get a deeper understanding of what it means. That's you know, this is where you can thank our Western experience. So sometimes, you know, it's deep. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا means something. Is that we made you tribes and nations in order for you to know each other. It's that when you know others, you come back to yourself. There is no knowledge of the other without knowledge of yourself. So in fact, what is going, even in what we see in the Christian or the Jewish or any other spiritual experiences, is coming back to us, just to help us understand, don't be, and this is what the Prophet ﷺ, this is what we got in the Quran, don't be like the people who came before you. You can fall in the same traps, in the same problems, in the same mistakes. So Sharia. The third thing that came here as something which is an essential discussion that is coming from our experience in the West is the concept of citizenship. Is to be a member of, because the concept of citizenship is quite, it's when it comes to, you know, citizenship is a legal concept. And our answer was at the beginning a legal answer coming from Sharia and fiqh. Okay, so we are saying in fiqh terms that we are speaking about fiqh al-aqaliyat. This is the legal answer, okay? But the legal framework in the West is saying that citizenship has nothing to do with minority. So you have a legal reference talking about minority, while the legal reference in the West say, no, that's exactly when you are not a minority. Because there is no, so, okay, two legal responses that are contradicting themselves in essence. That citizenship is not about this, while the fiqh al-aqaliyat is about that. So how are we going to deal with this? And this is where you can see that if we don't come to the legal and rules and what Dr. Ahmed said this morning, be careful. We might speak about rules and legal, but not in the same way. And we are not talking about this in the same way. So this is where, in fact, anything which has to do with rituals to be protected in the name of the constitutional rights, freedom of worship and freedom of conscience, in the name of this, the very essence of you being a Muslim is not to be put in a minority right. This is a majority thing that you are talking about. So you are not starting with rituals as a minority, rituals as part of the citizenship, which is completely changing the mindset that we have to have with the surrounding society. And once again, this is in legal terms. This is in legal terms, while sometimes we are doing something which is opposite. So the concept of citizenship, understanding, as Wilhelm Schenkel was putting it, that now we have to deal with different levels of citizenship, that you have formal citizenship, legal, and informal citizenship, which is psychological. Ibrahim, is something that we have to take into account in the environment. Because all this is important, and yet we need to deal with human beings around us. And human beings around us, with all what we were saying, they have the feeling that our Muslim presence is a kind of new colonization, a silent colonization. You can say it's wrong, but you know, people are, you know, get builders in Holland, but also what is happening with, you know, the guy who was behind the Sharia bill in the United States, coming with figures, say, and just what you said this morning, 500 time, you know, multiplied. It's you can say, Alhamdulillah. You say, Alhamdulillah. Others are saying, wow. That's dangerous. So the sense that you are dealing with the psychology of people who are scared. You come back in the Quran and أَجِئْتَنَا لِتَلْفِتَنَا عَمَّا وَجَدْنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاءَنَا. You know this fear that the Rusul are coming and say, what is your take? It's a relationship of power and understanding that we are putting the identity of the countries at risk. So we need also to get it right that whatever you think, and you can be scholars, the fears of the people around you will have an impact on the Muslims around you as well. So it's a two-way process. The people who are scared will have an impact on the Muslims. And then there is a psychology of double, you know, two-way fear reality that we have to deal with. The second thing that what Ibrahim was saying about losing identity, the identity crisis, which is quite clear everywhere. And by the way, once again, it's a double identity crisis. We also have this. We also are experiencing this. Visibility, as I was saying, it's important because the new visibility of Muslims is something which is, and the new visibility is, it's in many ways, is through architecture, our mosques, our dresses, our colors, and our discourse. The fact that we are more and more present and we have a Western Islamic discourse is carrying for some. So what you think is expected, it's at the same time worry. Islamophobia, it's there, so I'm not going to add to this because we spoke about it and we'll come back to this. The role of religion It's important. We are bringing back religion as a central discussion and a central concern. But it's deeper than that even, is that by coming back with religion, we understand and we are nurturing a sense for people who are scared to speak about their religion, that they can be more assertive. And some are expecting from the Muslim to ask the questions they don't dare to ask. And you can see this everywhere. So once again, this discussion here, it's important. And once again, it's not always positive. You know, when the one who is in charge of the relationship between Catholicism and Islam is saying, we can thank the Muslims for bringing back God in our secular society. This is positive as a statement. When you talk to the people around, what he is saying is that it's not as positive as this. Because it's positive, we can speak about God, but it's them. So this us versus them is there also. And the second thing, which is also important, and we have to take this into account, is the international issues. And we have to be very clear on that the environment where we are is also for the ordinary citizens, but also when it comes to power, is the relationship that, in fact, the impact on international issues on us, as much as we have an impact on the whole question. And we were talking about Salafiyya. It's the literalist, the Salafiyya al-Harfiyya, which is a very specific trend of Salafi today, which are not violent. I'm not talking about the violent. I'm talking about the literalists. And you can see that everywhere, from the United States to every country, there is a paradoxical support for this trend. And it's not only because the Saudis have money. It's in fact, this trend is confirming the image of Muslims being literalist, backward, and not being involved, and pushing to isolation. So there is a fact, a strategy here is who we need to support. And if you think that you have an open discourse, you are ready to interact, and you think it's going to be accepted, no, you are more dangerous for political reasons than somebody who's saying isolation, a strict way of dressing, strict way of not talking. This is something that is pushed. There is a strategy here. So there is an objective alliance between the more Salafi and the so-called secular societies, or secular states, not societies, states, and powers. So they understand how they can take advantage of this image, because we are confirming the image that we are alien, we are the other. So that's also important. Add to this violence and something that has to be, that we need to deal. We need to deal with it, but it's everywhere. It's also the way radicals are working. So there are Muslims that are violent and extremists. We cannot deny this. Now we have to take a stand on this. We also need to understand that now it's we have some figures and we have some strategies that some power and some people are infiltrating. We have informants that are pushing people to do things, and sometimes they let them do. So once again, we should not be naive about what is done by, let some radicals do what they want to do, and this is nurturing a sense of threat around, which in fact for us cannot justify our silence. We need to be vocal as to what we know and not naive about what we don't know. So speak out when you know, say that's not Islam, but not to be naive as the fact that we are not, aware that it has been played with, and sometimes it's a dirty game. Now, this is the environment and the question. So who we are and where we are. How do we, and fiqh al-aqaliyat and this mindset, the legal answer, redefining Sharia and coming back to our reference. Citizenship as a concept, how do we deal with this, and knowing that citizenship is a status that is a majority situation, we don't have a majority minority, and this means that we have to reassess the way we deal with the legal framework. The fourth one is about the state, our relationship with the state, and the secular or secularity and the secularism, the secular process. And then we have to deal with people around us who are scared of our presence, and we need to take this into account. This has nothing to do with the state, it has to do with our fellow citizens when it comes to the fear of colonization, losing their identity, racism sometimes, and the connection with international situations, with violence as much as it could be with literalism. Now, having said that, all this environment coming back to us, and this is the second part, and I go to my conclusion here, is for us as Muslims, and this is where our contribution will come through this challenge for us, which is the way we understand our Sharia, the way we understand Sharia, but the way also we are dealing with internal challenges. And as you were saying, is that this dialogue between Muslims, the trends that we have now, how we are dealing with literalists, with violent extremists sometimes, and dealing also from within with this political understanding that the states could play with us, and then we need to get something which is a vision for the future. So this is something which is to at least to know the environment, to know how we have to deal with it, and how to have to deal with our own community in our understanding of Sharia as a common past, diversity as a reality among Muslims, and how do we deal with who are the people that we can get around the table, and knowing that some others are not going to be around the table. They are going to be used against or used against us. So we need to also think about a strategy that is protecting us from greater damage. The second thing is having to deal with this from within is also to deal with the environment in a new way, which is, this is where I'm talking about our contribution will come from this liberation, or liberating our mind from only legal responses, but to come to the higher objectives. And this is why we are talking about the maqasid. This is why we are talking about the ethical references. In fact, if you look at the West, in many of the Western countries, if you look at this, the 5 or 6 principles or higher objectives, they are more respected in non-Muslim majority countries than in Muslim majority countries. That's the reality of it. Maybe the legal thing, but when we are talking about deen, the freedom that we have in some Western countries is more a reality than in Muslim majority countries. And this is the reality. If you come about, respecting a nafs, respecting, even the family, because that's deep. Of course, the reference to family in the West is problematic, but look at the way, in practical terms, in Muslim majority countries, in poor societies, what they have to deal with family is just very difficult. This is a big challenge. It's not protected as such. So when we come with this vision that we have the main objectives, and then inductively we try to translate this into reality in the society. This is where what some of the questions that we have in the West are exactly the same in Muslim majority countries, but this is where we have to change our mindset now to deal with the legal framework in the light of the great objective that we want to achieve. And in fact, in very deep terms, how are we going to protect a deen? How are we going to protect the personal integrity, which is a nafs? How are we going to come to this in the light of this objective, not to undermine our reference to the rules, but to get the rules in the light of the objective? So this tension that we have, this is where in the West we have to come. And this could be our contribution. Why? Because this is where we can come with a very more assertive discourse on religion. It's a very assertive discourse on religion based on human dignity, based on justice, based on the way we protect family. And if you think that there is one single fellow citizens in the country that is not happy with us saying we have to protect family, and we have to come, of course, now we have to be very cautious to define family in the way we want, because what we are seeing now is some Muslims are willing to please the West by saying, oh, we might redefine family, we might redefine. No, we have to be quite clear on this. So this is why I'm saying assertive as to the rules, and visionary as to the goals. Is that what we want so in fact is a shift in our mindset, is the way we put the questions should come from within, not responding to the West, but coming with our own contribution, in which way this relationship between our objectives and our rules is going to be a contribution to the West. At the end, are we confident enough to think that we have something to bring to this society? Not in theoretical terms, because this is all nice, we have nice values, in practical terms. When we deal with the community, when we deal with our fellow brothers and sisters in Islam. And this is where there are two things that we need to get. In fact, there is something which has to do with thinking of the rules in the light of the objective. That's important, and it means here the rules to resist and the ethical teachings to contribute. The rule to resist is Islam, and we are not going to play with this. So this is why we need to be, but how are we going to be, and this is the paradoxical side of the equation, how are we going to be assertive with the rules is by being more contributing in ethical terms. And in fact, this is the opposite that we are doing. We are not assertive with the rules because we are on the defensive. So we don't have an assertive way to put something in the equation. And in fact, it should be the ethical teachings of Islam. And the ethical teaching of Islam is to show how much the rules are helping us to be ethical and how much the ethical side is helping us to protect the rules. So we need an ethical, assertive discourse that is helping us to be clear on the rules. But the rules alone are not going to make it because it's going to isolate ourselves. So our interaction with the surrounding society should be on, where we are coming with an ethical discourse that in fact for us is universal. We understand that it's universal, but to protect the singularity of our rules by the universality of our ethics. And not the other way around, not to be on the defensive with our rules because we are going to be isolated in this. And then the last thing which is important, and this is part of what I'm doing now, I have been working on relationship with the state and the legal framework, fatwa, and the three books that I wrote on this were mainly Muslims in secular society, to be European Muslim, Western Muslims, and the future of Islam was mainly about fatwa and the legal framework. How do we define this? And in fact, at the end is the relationship with the legal framework and with the state. In fact, we need now to be much more involved in the discussion about the narrative. It's about the belonging, the sense of belonging. And this is why the point here is what is the West? Where are we in the West? How do we understand and we need to recapture the very essence of this Western experience in history, in the scientific, the philosophical, the economic, and the sociological field. That this is why we have to come back to the narrative, is to nurture, to deepen our sense of belonging to the West. So now, not only to be able, because I'm saying this every time, Islam is a Western religion. It's a European religion, but what does it mean in historical, psychological, and social terms, and even political and economic terms, is where we are connecting this, because this will help us to go deeper, and this is our main contribution. But it shouldn't be only a belonging to a history. It's bringing back religious, philosophical questions that we have here. It's to question pluralism from within as something which is part. Now, having said all this, this is the end of the second part, which is what is coming from within. So as you can see, as a conclusion, three things. It's multiple. We have multiple dimensions, and we have to work here and this is why we have to be a bit more professional, more specialized. And this is why I'm saying there is no future for us if we don't institutionalize our presence. Institutionalize our presence means that we need institutions working on the legal, the objective, the philosophical. But we need people who are being able to deal with the state. We need people who are going to be able to deal with the fellow citizens. We need people who are more specialized. So a holistic understanding based on specialized approaches. And this is where we need to work. This is what we have been talking about in the European Muslim Network. This is what we are trying to do. The institution, the CILE, the Center for Islamic Legislation, is about the vision, it's about being assertive, it's about how do we get rid of this defensive way of dealing with the legal, with an assertive way of dealing with maqasid and ethics. This is exactly what we want. But by the way, it's not only for Muslim minority countries, it's for throughout the world, because they have exactly the same problem. Look at what is happening in the Islamic discourse in Muslim majority countries. You can see exactly the same. Even I was surprised in some discourses that I got from Indonesia. Sometimes they are behind us as to the way we are dealing with Islamic principles, in the way we are dealing with the secular society, in the most important Muslim majority countries as to the numbers. You say, which type of discourse do we have now? And I think that this is important. Now, the second point, so multiple dimensions and institutionalizing this, it's our contribution. And in our contribution, once again, I keep on repeating this because I think that it's not very much understood by the Muslims what it means to be a witness. It's how to be a witness. And this is where I think that, yes, we are going at the periphery to speak about justice. We're going to speak about freedom, as I said. We are going to speak about justice as the end or the final project of us living together. But once again, the most important contribution in this world, and this is what you can see, and for all of us who are living in society where we are so much influenced by the Western culture, at the end is the true freedom that we were talking about 3 days ago. It's about the spiritual contribution. And I think that we have now to understand that if we are so much questioned about social problems, cultural problems, economic problems, socio-economic problems, is to push us to respond at the periphery of who we are and not to come at the center of what we are bringing, and what we are bringing in the spiritual discourse. And not to make it as we have now. There are two Islams. One is the legal Islam, and the other one is the mystical Islam, is the Sufi. And that we have now, we are seeing now a new type of Sufis that is very much colonized by what is happening in the West, which is, okay, you can be a Sufi and have mysticism in a way, but it's not rooted in the tradition, it's something which is marginal. And in fact, you can be completely a consumerist as to your daily life, and a Sufi as few hours a week or few hours a day. And I think that this is our contribution. It's important in the spiritual side, but also by coming with something which is alien to the Muslims. You know what? For me, one of the most important contributions of Muslims to the West will be by doing something that the West is pushing them to do, is to reconcile Muslims with philosophy and the questions that are essential. It's the why. Why? These are philosophical questions in the West. It's essential in Islam. Why? In fact, the intention is إنما الأعمال بالنيات is the why, is why this life, why, and we have to push the West to reconcile with the philosophical question, which is for us the essence of the spiritual answer. So we don't have a problem with philosophy if we know that at the center there is this, and then as we said, the consequences of this is the social contribution, the political contribution, and the economic contribution. And my last point is our presence, and at the end we also have to ask ourselves, Ibrahim was referring to loyalty. I think loyalty is essential. Critical loyalty is the only way we have to be loyal. Critical by saying we promote al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. Al-amr bil-ma'ruf, we are supporting everything which is good done by anybody. We don't have a problem with this, but we are going to be critical in anything which is wrong internally. And then this critical loyalty is important. And also something that we need to understand now. Look at the West. This celebration of democracy, this celebration of the nation state, this celebration of the free market. At the end, do we buy this? We don't. So are we ready to have a constructive, critical presence by saying, okay, that's fine, we need to talk about secularism. I don't have a problem talking about it, but I want to be critical towards this. So what do you mean by secularism and secularity? Is you're distinguishing between the state and religion. What about the state and economy? This is a critical. About democracy, you speak about democracy when you see populism winning everywhere in the country where I live in, where we were saying, you know, nothing could happen like it happens in France. The UKIP now is, and they are the first to have their alliance at the European level. It means that Europe is changing, and populism means that the media and fears are now taking over any democratic process. So in the name of democracy, we end up having people who are acting against it, and against at least diversity and pluralism. Are we ready to be critical? What is our critical contribution to the political discourse? To the discourse on secularity? And we are so much obsessed with pleasing and being accepted that we end up not being critical on some of the deep questions of our time. The West needs a critical discourse, and Muslims could do this in the name of their principles and then in the name of also the objective. And for example, the nation state, what does it mean when you see that the nation state now is a reference that is pushing the people to in fact justify any type of racism? So when you have the mainstream parties justifying racism, something that we thought it was going to end and it's coming back, and we should not tackle this as victims, but as people who are constructively critical towards their country, their society. So these are things that are the environment within and contribution for the future, but it means that you cannot get this, but if you are confident as to your principles, confident as to your mission, and confident as what it means to be a witness. And a witness is somebody who knows his or her principles, but also the failures within, the mistakes, the shortcomings that we are facing, because we have to be critical on that. Okay, I took all my time, and even more, 5 minutes more. So as I told you, no questions for you. It's the break now, and this afternoon you will come with the questions if you have. If you don't, that's fine. Okay, so break. Thank you.